When I married Sophia 2 years ago, I knew her life as an actress wouldn't be conventional. She warned me about the late nights, unpredictable schedules, and occasional flirtations with fame, though fame wasn't exactly what she had yet. Her career was still on the fringes, mostly smaller, low-budget films, the kind you might stumble across at 2 a.m. on cable. But she loved what she did, and I loved her passion for it. I was the steady one in our relationship. At 25, I worked as a marketing analyst, the kind of job with spreadsheets and deadlines that let me clock out at 5 and leave work at the office. We balanced each other that way. My practicality to her spontaneity, my quiet to her energy. But lately something felt off. It started with the little things. Sophia had always been bad at texting, but now it felt deliberate. My once playful texts went unanswered for hours. When she finally responded, her messages were short and vague. "Work's busy," she'd say. Or, "Just tired, babe." Her phone, once casually tossed on the coffee table, now seemed glued to her hand. She'd take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and it was always on silent. A few times, I noticed her angling the screen away when I was nearby. I told myself I was imagining things, but the feeling wouldn't go away. She started coming home later, often with rehearsed excuses. The director wanted to run a few more takes, or we grabbed drinks after the shoot. Sometimes she smelled faintly of cologne. Not hers, not mine, but expensive and unfamiliar. I asked her about it once, casually. "Oh, it's probably from one of the guys on set," she said, shrugging it off with a laugh. "You know how close everyone gets during filming." Her nonchalance made me feel like I was overreacting, but the gnawing doubt only grew. One Friday, I decided to surprise her. I left work early and cooked dinner. Her favorite pasta with a bottle of red wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. She came home 2 hours later than usual, her eyes widening when she saw the table set. "Oh, Alex," she said, her voice light but strained. "This is sweet. I didn't know you'd be home early." She kissed my cheek and moved past me to the bedroom to change, avoiding my gaze. Her smile didn't reach her eyes that night, and as we ate, she barely touched her food. I didn't press her. Instead, I poured myself another glass of wine and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. Couples go through rough patches, right? Maybe it was just the stress of work or the pressure of landing her next role. But when she fell asleep early that night, her phone still clutched in her hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. Something I didn't know how to hold on to. Sophia's acting career had always been the centerpiece of her life. When we first met, I admired her passion for it, the way she spoke about characters as if they were living, breathing people. She'd share every detail, auditions, callbacks, on-set mishaps. But lately, the stories had stopped coming. The change was gradual, so subtle I almost missed it. At first, it was her vague responses when I asked about her day. Then it was her excuses for not sharing much at all. Exhaustion, stress, or nothing of note happening. The vibrant tales I once enjoyed hearing faded into hollow answers that left me wondering what she wasn't saying. She became more attached to her phone, always holding it close, as if it were something precious. It stayed face down on the coffee table during dinner or tucked away in her pocket when we watched TV. The once innocent habit of leaving it charging in random spots around the apartment was gone. I didn't want to admit it, but I was beginning to feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Her late nights became more frequent. She'd return home long after I'd eaten dinner alone, her makeup heavier than usual and her clothes carrying faint, unfamiliar scents. When she walked through the door, one evening smelling of cologne, my stomach turned. She offered an explanation, something about long hours and a meticulous director, but it felt thin, rehearsed. I noticed her growing distance in other ways, too. She used to laugh at my silly jokes, used to ask about my day with genuine curiosity. Now, she seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere even when we were in the same room. I tried to convince myself it was the stress of her career, the pressure to land better roles in an industry that demanded so much. But something gnawed at me, a creeping doubt I couldn't shake. It was on one of those late nights, while I waited for her to come home, that I saw her phone buzzing on the counter. She'd left it there, unlocked, a rare slip in her newfound vigilance. I glanced at the screen out of instinct, and the notification froze me in place. Ethan, can't wait to see you again tomorrow. The words burned into my mind. I didn't recognize the name, and the message wasn't casual. It carried a weight, a familiarity that made my stomach churn. My first instinct was to pick up the phone, to scroll through and find answers. But the moment I touched it, the screen darkened, locking me out. I set it back down and paced the kitchen, my thoughts racing. Who was Ethan? A co-star? A director? Or someone else entirely? When Sophia finally returned, I watched her closely, searching for clues in the way she carried herself. Her smiles felt forced, her laughter hollow. She gave me the same vague answers as always, and when I asked how her shoot went, she waved it off like it didn't matter. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop replaying that notification in my head. The words felt intimate, like something a lover would say. Every breath she took beside me felt heavier than the last, each one a reminder that I might not know her as well as I thought. I told myself I could be imagining things, letting my insecurities get the better of me. But the doubts had taken root, and no amount of rationalizing could make them go away. For the first time, I found myself wondering if Sophia had secrets she wasn't ready to share. The days following that message became a blur of unease. I carried the weight of suspicion in silence, unwilling to speak my thoughts aloud. I wasn't ready to confront Sophia, unsure if I could handle the answer. But the doubt lingered, creeping into every corner of my mind. Sophia's routine carried on as if nothing had changed. Her late nights at work remained frequent. Her energy drained when she returned. She spoke less about her day, offering vague updates that felt more like rehearsed lines than genuine conversation. Each time she smiled at me, it felt thinner, as if there was less of her behind it. I told myself it was my imagination. Relationships go through phases, I thought. Stress, exhaustion, these were normal parts of life. But the feeling of distance between us only grew stronger. She seemed preoccupied, her mind elsewhere even when we shared the same space. One evening, I sat in the living room, waiting for her to return from another long day. The clock ticked louder in the silence, every passing minute amplifying the weight in my chest. By the time she walked through the door, her steps felt lighter than they should have, her face carrying a faint glow of contentment. She moved through the apartment, casually setting her bag on the counter and slipping out of her shoes. Her phone buzzed once, briefly lighting up the screen, but she picked it up so quickly that I didn't catch the notification. When she finally noticed me sitting there, she smiled. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but distant. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, casually sipping as if the tension in the room didn't exist. I wanted to ask her where she'd been, what she'd been doing, but the words caught in my throat. Her expression didn't invite questions, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answers. That night, I lay awake in bed long after she had fallen asleep beside me. The faint sound of her steady breathing filled the room, a sharp contrast to the storm in my mind. I replayed the events of the past few weeks. The late nights, the vague explanations, the lingering scent of cologne. Was I imagining things? Was I letting doubt twist the narrative in my head? Or was there something deeper going on? Something she wasn't telling me? I stared at the ceiling, searching for clarity, but finding none. The longer I stayed silent, the heavier the weight became, pressing down on me with a force I couldn't ignore. By morning, I resolved to confront her, not with accusations, but with honesty. If there was a crack in our relationship, I needed to understand where it had come from. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for the truth. But as the sun rose and she moved about the apartment, her laughter spilling into the kitchen as she hummed a tune under her breath, my resolve faltered. How do you question someone you love without breaking the fragile balance you've built together? I watched her pour her coffee, the light catching in her hair. She looked at me then, smiling as if nothing had changed. And for a fleeting moment, I convinced myself to let it go, to let things stay as they were. But deep down, I knew that the cracks were already spreading, whether I wanted to see them or not. A week passed, each day stretching endlessly under the weight of my unease. Sophia remained an enigma, her movements and words carefully curated. I told myself again and again that I was overthinking things, that the woman I married couldn't possibly be hiding something so monumental. But the doubts refused to fade. One afternoon at work, my phone buzzed with a notification. My inbox showed a new email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "You deserve to know the truth." Curiosity and dread tangled in my chest as I opened the message. Inside was a brief note. "Sophia has been lying to you. She doesn't deserve your loyalty. See for yourself." Below the text was a single video file attachment. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Who was this? How did they know Sophia? And why would they send this to me? Every part of me screamed to delete it, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to hold on to the illusion of normalcy for just a little longer. But my finger moved on its own, tapping the file and watching as the video began to play. The grainy footage showed a dimly lit restaurant, the kind of upscale place Sophia always claimed was out of her budget. She sat at a corner table, laughing, her posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Opposite her was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, confident, with dark hair that framed his face perfectly. He leaned closer to her, his hand brushing hers casually. Sophia didn't pull away. My chest tightened as the video continued. It was a short clip, barely a minute long, but it felt endless. I watched as they shared a laugh, the man leaning closer to whisper something in her ear. Sophia's face lit up in a smile, a real smile, the kind that used to be reserved for me. The clip ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the black screen. My mind raced, replaying the scene over and over. Who was this man? Could he be Ethan? And why had someone sent this to me? The video replayed in my mind, even after I shut my phone off and buried it in my pocket. The images of Sophia leaning into that man, Ethan, I assumed, burned into my thoughts, shattering whatever fragile denial I had clung to. Her smile, so natural, so familiar, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. But the questions gnawed at me even more than the footage itself. Who had sent the email? Why would they care enough to share this with me? I returned home that evening, the weight of the video pressing down on me. Sophia greeted me as she always did, her tone cheerful, her demeanor effortless. If she noticed the strain in my responses, she didn't show it. She moved through the apartment with ease, laughing at her own jokes, oblivious to the storm inside me. As soon as she disappeared into the bathroom to shower, I grabbed my phone and opened the email again. This time, I noticed a small detail I had overlooked, the sender's address. It was an anonymous, generic username, but something about it felt deliberate. This wasn't random. I read the brief note again, searching for hidden meanings in its simplicity. Sophia has been lying to you. She doesn't deserve your loyalty. See for yourself. The choice of words struck me. The sender's tone wasn't just informative. It was personal, almost bitter. Whoever had sent this wasn't neutral. They weren't simply exposing the truth. They wanted something. The following evening, another email arrived. My stomach churned as I opened it, half dreading what I might find. If you want proof that this isn't the only time, check the attached file. Attached was another video, this one taken outdoors. Sophia and Ethan were walking side by side down a quiet street, their bodies close, shoulders brushing. He laughed at something she said, then reached out to take her hand. She hesitated, glancing around nervously, but eventually let him lace his fingers through hers. The video ended with them entering what looked like an upscale apartment building. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. The evidence was undeniable now, but so were the questions. Who was behind this? That night, as Sophia slept beside me, her breathing even and peaceful, I stared at the ceiling, piecing together the puzzle. If the sender had been Ethan himself, why expose his own actions? A random outsider would have had no reason to care. The pieces began to fit when I considered the possibility I had been avoiding. This was personal. As I lay awake in the darkened bedroom, Sophia's calm, rhythmic breathing beside me, I made a decision. There would be no shouting matches, no dramatic accusations, no chaotic scenes. Whatever this was, I wouldn't let it spiral into the kind of mess that left both of us irreparably broken. Confronting her would accomplish nothing. Not yet. If the person who sent those videos wanted chaos, they wouldn't get it from me. Instead, I would approach this quietly, carefully, and with purpose. The videos had confirmed my worst fears, but they also left gaps in the story. Who was Ethan to her, really? How long had this been going on? And why had someone chosen now to send me proof? The answers wouldn't come from anger or confrontation. They would come from patience and strategy. The following morning, I went about my routine as though nothing had changed. I made coffee, packed for work, and kissed Sophia lightly on the cheek as I left the apartment. If she sensed any tension in me, she didn't show it. At work, I found myself unable to focus. My thoughts kept returning to the emails, the videos, the sender's motives. As the hours passed, my initial anger cooled into something sharper: clarity. This wasn't about catching Sophia in a lie. That part was already done. Now, it was about preserving what was left of myself in the wake of her choices. If I handled this right, I could walk away with my dignity intact, without letting this affair define me. That evening, when I returned home, I found Sophia sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a faint smile. The sight of her stirred something painful in me, but I forced myself to keep my expression neutral. "How was your day?" she asked casually, setting her phone aside. "Busy," I replied, my voice steady. "You?" She stretched lazily and shrugged. "Same. Nothing exciting." Her words stung more than they should have. I thought of the videos, of the easy laughter she had shared with Ethan, and wondered how long she'd been crafting these lies. But I simply nodded, offering her a small smile before heading into the kitchen. Over the next few days, I kept myself composed, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Sophia continued her routine, blissfully unaware of what I knew. Each time she left for one of her long shoots, I felt the urge to confront her rise, but I held it back. Instead, I focused on gathering clarity. I didn't need to know every detail of her betrayal, just enough to decide how to move forward. As painful as it was, I couldn't let emotion dictate my actions. A week later, another email arrived. "You've been silent. Don't you care that she's betraying you? Here's more proof. Her lies go deeper than you think." Attached was another video, this one showing Sophia and Ethan at what appeared to be a rehearsal space. They sat close together, laughing over something on her phone. When Ethan reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, she didn't flinch. I didn't watch the video twice. Instead, I closed my phone and let out a slow breath. The sender, whoever they were, wanted a reaction. They wanted me to act rashly, to explode in anger and bring everything crashing down. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Sophia anymore. It was about me. If I was going to end this chapter of my life, I would do it quietly, on my own terms. The email and its tone lingered in my mind. The sender seemed agitated by my lack of reaction, almost as if they were invested in my response. They weren't just exposing Sophia. They wanted something more. But what? I decided to examine the situation differently. If someone was going to such lengths to expose Sophia's affair, they likely had their own agenda. This wasn't about me, not entirely. It was personal to them too. That night, I revisited the emails, combing through every word in detail. The language was sharp, almost venomous, and the repeated insistence that Sophia didn't deserve my loyalty struck a chord. This wasn't the language of an impartial observer. I noticed something else, small inconsistencies in the timing of the videos. They were always shot at intimate moments but lacked the kind of spontaneity that real, accidental recordings might have. These videos were deliberate, calculated. Someone had been watching them closely, perhaps even orchestrating these encounters. Then, a thought crossed my mind that sent a chill down my spine. The sender wasn't just exposing Sophia. They were targeting Ethan. Over the next few days, I watched Sophia more carefully. She was as casual as ever, slipping in and out of her long shoots, and returning home with the same hollow smiles and vague explanations. Meanwhile, I pieced together what I could about Ethan. I combed through her social media, old photos, and any mention she'd made about work. Eventually, I found him, a rising actor with just enough fame to warrant attention. His charm was evident even in photographs, his confidence practically radiating through the screen. But something else caught my eye. Among the flood of congratulatory comments on one of his recent posts, a single username appeared more than once, standing out for its intensity. The comments weren't supportive, they were bitter sarcastic. The username I'd noticed, frequent, biting, and unmistakably personal, became my first real lead. Whoever this person was, they seemed obsessed with Ethan. Their comments ranged from sarcastic jabs about his acting to cryptic remarks that hinted at a deeper connection. Some people don't know how to stay loyal, do they? And guess fame gets to your head. Huh? I spent the better part of an hour clicking through their profile, piecing together a picture. The account belonged to someone named Olivia. It didn't take long to figure out that she wasn't just another critical fan. Her photos revealed she was an actress herself, albeit one with fewer credits to her name than Ethan. Scrolling deeper, I came across older posts of hers with Ethan in the frame, smiling, laughing, posing on sets together. They looked close, the kind of bond that suggested a history. But as the months went on, the pictures stopped, replaced by vague, moody captions about betrayal and unrequited effort. Suddenly, everything clicked. Olivia wasn't just some onlooker. She was the one behind the emails. I returned to the video evidence and began watching it with fresh eyes. This wasn't about Sophia at all. Not for Olivia. Every clip, every carefully chosen angle, focused just as much on Ethan as it did on my wife. The bitterness in her emails wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at him. Olivia wanted Ethan exposed. Sophia was collateral damage. The revelation was strangely sobering. I wasn't alone in this, but I also wasn't the main character in Olivia's story. I had become a tool for her to dismantle whatever remained of Ethan's reputation. For the next few days, I debated my next move. The quiet resolve I'd clung to remained firm, but the idea of being a pawn in someone else's game unsettled me. I had to confront the situation, not with anger, but with clarity. Then, one evening, as I sat alone in the apartment waiting for Sophia to return, another email arrived. This one was different. You've been silent too long. If you don't confront her, I will. You can't let her get away with this. Attached was a new photo of Sophia and Ethan, this time seated on the edge of a stage, their faces close, his hand resting casually on her knee. The image wasn't grainy or distant. It was sharp, clear, and damning. Olivia wasn't just documenting their affair anymore. She was taunting me. But I refused to act on impulse. Instead, I crafted my response. I know who you are, Olivia. This isn't about Sophia, is it? Tell me why you're really doing this. I hit send and waited, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The reply came faster than I expected. Sophia isn't innocent, but you're right. This is about Ethan. He's a liar and a cheat, and he deserves to lose everything. But you already know that, don't you? I'm giving you a chance to do what I couldn't. Leave her. I stared at the screen, her words as sharp and cutting as the images she'd sent. Olivia wasn't offering me closure. She was demanding my participation in her revenge. And for the first time, I felt the weight of the decision I had to make, whether to let her pull the strings or to break free and handle this on my terms. After Olivia's message, my path became clear. She wanted chaos, but I wouldn't let her dictate how this ended. I wasn't interested in revenge for her sake. My actions would be for me, and me alone. If Sophia had chosen to tear apart our marriage, I would make sure she lived with the consequences, quietly and systematically. I spent the next few days planning. Patience was key. No impulsivos, no las confrontaciones. Everything had to be precise, measured, and executed without her realizing until it was too late. The first step was financial. I reviewed every joint account, every credit card, every bill tied to both our names. For years, I'd been the one managing the money, ensuring our stability, while she pursued her acting career. Sophia's finances were tied to mine, and she relied on me for far more than she realized. I began separating my assets, slowly and without leaving a trail she might notice. I moved my savings into a private account and canceled the automatic transfers into our joint one. I reduced the available credit on our shared cards and rerouted upcoming payments to accounts she couldn't access. It was subtle at first, the kind of changes she wouldn't notice until she tried to rely on them. The second step was documentation. I reviewed every piece of evidence Olivia had sent me, the videos, the photos, the emails, and saved them securely. I also began collecting my own. Every time Sophia claimed to be at a shoot, I logged the time and place. If her story didn't match later, I added it to my growing file. This wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about building an airtight case for what would come next. The third step was social. Sophia's career depended on her network, the fragile web of relationships she had built in the industry. She often boasted about her. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy my wife's life. It wasn't some dramatic moment where rage boiled over and made me lash out. No, it was slower, methodical, a quiet unraveling, one thread at a time, until the life Sophia thought she had built came crashing down. I started with her career. Sophia's acting was everything to her. Her identity, her pride, her future. She loved the idea of herself as the aspiring starlet, poised for success, even if the reality was far less glamorous. She wasn't big enough to make waves, but she was just big enough that the right whispers could sink her. It wasn't hard. The entertainment industry is small, and I'd heard enough from her over the years to know which bridges could burn the hottest. I didn't lie. I didn't have to. I simply shared the truth about her behavior on set, the long shoots that weren't really shoots, the networking that was nothing more than personal indulgence. A quiet email here, a passing comment there, all planted with the right people. Soon, the calls stopped coming. The role she prided herself on dried up. The director she once charmed no longer had time for her. Sophia chalked it up to bad luck at first, but as the weeks stretched into months, her confidence began to crack. Next was her social life. Sophia had always thrived on attention, surrounding herself with friends who adored her or envied her. But those relationships were as shallow as they were numerous. She'd burned bridges without realizing it, leaving just enough animosity in her wake for me to nudge them into place. I didn't have to do much. Just a few carefully curated conversations to the right people. Stories about her private escapades with Ethan found their way into her circle, whispered over drinks and shared in hushed tones at parties. The looks she started getting weren't admiration anymore. They were judgment, pity, even disgust. Finally, there was Ethan. Olivia's emails gave me everything I needed to know about him. I didn't confront him or lash out. Instead, I let the mess he created implode on its own. I forwarded one of Olivia's videos to his current partner, another actress he'd been publicly linked to. I kept it anonymous, of course, but the fallout was immediate. Ethan's name became toxic almost overnight. His partner dumped him. His reputation in the industry took a nosedive, and any connection he had to Sophia was now a liability. Through all of this, I never let Sophia see what was coming. I was kind, calm, and supportive on the surface, letting her confide in me as her world slowly crumbled. She had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. The final blow came when I handed her divorce papers. I'd waited until her finances were strained, her career was in ruins, and her support system was gone. She stared at the papers in disbelief, her voice shaking as she asked why. "I think you already know why," I said simply. She broke down, sobbing, begging for another chance, but I was done. I walked out that day without raising my voice, without anger. She wasn't worth it anymore. It's been months since I left Sophia, and I've had time to process everything. Looking back, I realized revenge didn't bring me happiness, it brought me closure. It wasn't about destroying her. It was about reclaiming my own life after she tore it apart. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can choose how to respond, whether it's with anger, pain, or, in my case, quiet resolve. My advice to anyone in a similar situation? Take your time. Don't act out of emotion, and don't let them pull you into chaos. Focus on yourself, your dignity, and your future. The best revenge isn't just living well. It's leaving them with nothing but the consequences of their own choices. And to those who think they can lie and betray without consequence, remember, the truth always finds a way to surface. Thanks for reading Reddit. If you're going through something similar, know you're not alone. And remember, you're worth more than being someone's second choice.